Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, and Tansei. My name is Justin Bourque, and I am the president of the Athabasca Indigenous Investments. I'm excited to set the stage here for you tonight as my fellow speakers and I share our perspectives on how public and private sectors can and should support economic reconciliation and what role they might play in creating a space for Indigenous development that can lead to economic sovereignty. One important topic as of late has been equity ownership in resource development. I have been fortunate to have experience in executing two major equity ownership transactions for Indigenous communities. In 2021, Suncor, along with 3 First Nations and 5 Métis communities, formed a partnership called ASTIZI in the acquisition of the Northern Courier pipeline system. And just 6 short months ago, in October of 2022, Enbridge and 23 diverse Indigenous communities, including the Cree, Dene, and Métis people of Northeast Alberta, partnered in what's being called a historic and precedent-setting event. The acquisition of 7 pipelines which serve as the arteries to the oil sands and carries critical energy infrastructure from our shared traditional territories to the global markets. Our consortium discussed the benefits of our partnership would have. Benefits not just for the people of today, but for future generations. The concept of 7 pipelines for 7 generations was discussed at great length with community leaders, elders, and soon became the theme of our transaction. It excites me to see these transactions close and the community's plans start to take shape. I am humbled to be privy of the amazing strategies that the shareholder communities of the Athabasca Indigenous Investments are putting into action with their dividends. Hiring of school teachers to develop the youth, improve the standard of living for the elders, buying of land, and building critical infrastructure are just a few of the plans that are already in motion, while other communities are looking to increase their investment opportunities and position their community not just to be asset owners in resource development, but to be influential in it. In my experience, the benefits that equity ownership provides is empowering to Indigenous people, and it provides the Indigenous leaders the capacity to enhance their community's way of life. The reality, though, is these benefits are not just specific to the Indigenous participants. Indigenous ownership and resource development brings revenues once destined for investors and injects them into the Indigenous communities, which then ripples into the neighboring towns and cities, strengthening our local economies and decoupling reliance by building resilience instead. There is no one and only pathway to economic reconciliation, but equity ownership is proving to be an effective option across all sectors, with lasting benefits for us all. We are seeing more examples of these good news stories every day, Indigenous-led organizations and allyships created with partnership in mind. Just the other week, it was announced that Cedar LNG received an environmental approval, and with the green light on that project, Cedar LNG aims to be the first Indigenous majority-owned LNG facility, and yet another example of how Indigenous ownership can be structured to provide local benefit while playing a role in the global security. Frankly, the opportunity for economic reconciliation is more than just inclusion in energy and resource development. It's a mechanism to inclusively respond to the climate crisis we are currently navigating. As government and corporate communities adjust to the mandated reporting requirements of the environmental, social, and corporate governance, or ESG practices, that are now at the forefront of business considerations across the globe, a paradigm shift in how we view and do business is taking place, driving corporations to think, act, operate, and conduct business differently. And the word sustainability is at the center of it all. It's important to recognize that this new focus for business has always been the traditional views and values of Indigenous peoples. With this new common alignment in values sets the foundation for long-lasting partnerships to flourish. This alignment is fundamental for Indigenous communities to become vested partners in providing a collective path forward, and with it, we can increase the corporate response time to the climate crisis. Indigenous partnerships will continue to emerge in new and existing markets, from emission reduction technologies to low-carbon fuels, biodiversity and environmental enhancements, renewable energy, and carbon capture and sequestration projects like the Wabamun Carbon Hub, the partnership between Enbridge and 5 Indigenous communities, or the Cedar LNG, as mentioned earlier, which has the potential to reduce global emissions by reducing the global demand on coal. Participation in these markets will enhance Indigenous economic sovereignty, increase project certainty, and strengthen our economies while collectively taking action in the fight against climate. This creates a value chain of benefit for Indigenous communities, their corporate partners, Canadians, governments, and the world. It positions Canada as global leaders in ESG and having a direct ability to influence the global emissions by providing our morally developed resources, both locally and to our international allies, while enhancing the way of life for Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike. In the end, reconciliation is about righting the injustices of the past while embarking on a common journey into the future. Economic reconciliation through equity ownership is a critical component of that future, and if done right, we can ensure economic sovereignty of the Indigenous peoples for generations to come, while Canada leads the world into a net zero future. Thank you. Kinanastamoten.